Everyone. I hope you've all had a brilliant Easter break and brilliant time since our last meeting in March. We've got a really exciting session lined up for you today, and cannot wait to hear what Diana Bright has to say. I had a quick look through your amazing report with the WHO, and there are a lot of insights in there, so I can't wait to hear what you've got to say to us. Um, so this is the Clinical AI Interest Group at the Alan Turing Institute. My name's Nick Fuggle. I'm an associate professor in rheumatology based down at the University of Southampton. Um, I co-lead this group together with Alicia Davies, with Joe Oldman, and also Emma. Emma, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. I'm Emma Caroon. I'm a principal researcher at the Alan Turing Institute, mostly doing a lot of qualitative research at the moment about biomedical data science.
Brilliant. And we host these monthly webinars together with some other events and other initiatives, um, looking essentially to feed and educate those who are interested in the deployment of clinical AI. And one of the ways that we like to bring us all together, because we're quite disparate, spread geographically across time zones, is that we like to introduce ourselves to each other. And the way that we do that is through our 3-minute introductions. If you're keen to do one in the future, please do let us know. But Emma, I believe that we've got three lined up for today.
We
So
have.
9 minutes of solid introduction coming your way. Emma, would you like to introduce
Yeah,
our introductions?
yeah. So I'm going to call out all the names so they can get themselves ready. And please turn your cameras on. So the first one we've got is Troy Kettle, who I cannot see yet. So, and then um, Brian Hedrick, who I'm taking is William Hedrick under the name.
That's right.
Brilliant. And then Ayob, I can see Baridi. Brilliant. So, is it William or Brian? Should we start with you?
Well,
Because I can't see Troy, our first person.
sure. I go by Brian, but my name's William Bryan, so you can
Brilliant.
call me William or Brian.
Brilliant.
I'm William. I'm a registered nurse and clinical educator with 14 years of experience in acute hospital care, clinical education, and clinical review. I've worked as a nurse in medical, surgical, cardiac, and critical care settings, as well as in the insurance industry in utilization review and training roles. And more recently, I've been working in pre-licensure nurse education and developing clinical training programs. I've become really interested in how AI is being integrated into clinical workflows, especially documentation, decision support tools, and training. I think nursing work is very likely to be affected by the development of clinical AI. I myself am an end user of clinical AI at the bedside. For example, my hospital uses what we call a deterioration index module, which is part of Epic, which is an electronic medical record system. The deterioration index uses AI to predict the risk of patient deterioration and helps nurses shape our patient prioritization, as well as creating nurse-patient assignments. As a clinical nurse educator and end user of these emerging technologies, I'm really hoping to establish more of a nursing perspective, as well as a seat at the table of clinical AI. I think nurses bring an important patient-centered perspective to AI. I've personally been exploring how AI can support nursing education and clinical training, including generating and validating educational content, simulated high-risk patient scenarios, as well as natural language processing for medical record review and clinical decision support in the insurance and reimbursement industry. I'm very interested in the ethics of AI use and risks and benefits to patient safety and privacy, and the development of safe and effective clinical decision support tools. I'd really love to connect with anyone working on clinical AI tools, education or implementation, patient safety, clinical decision support, or people seeking a nursing perspective or insight into American hospital routines. I'm American, as you probably can tell from my accent, um, as well as insurance authorization processes and clinical nursing education. I would really like to go for a PhD at some point, but I'm still trying to figure out what my focus is and build a network and meet some mentors, get some maybe possibly involved in some research projects or assist by just sharing my knowledge. So please feel free to reach out to me. My contact info should be showing up here in my background. Thank you very much to Nick, Alicia, Joe, and Emma for creating this interesting forum. I've been learning so much over the last year as being part of this. So thank you. Nice to meet you, everybody.
Lovely to meet you too. And one quick thing, or two quick things. One is your notes. I think it's one a quirk of Zoom. It's reversed you, so it's the mirror image, which is fine. But what would you mind just kind of copying it and putting it into the chat because it looks like a brilliant summary
Absolutely.
of everything that you're offering. And also,
Yeah.
where in the States are you based? And what
Well,
time is it at the moment?
well, I'm actually currently traveling overseas. So I'm actually in Vietnam at the moment. And so
Okay.
it's 6 p.m. here.
Very
It's
late.
5 a.m. or it's 7 a.m. in the US, but I'm based out
Ah,
of West Virginia in the US. I work at
Yep.
a hospital in Virginia, right near about 2 hours from DC. And so I'm happy to share
Amazing.
my contact info. I'll put all that in the chat.
great.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. That was wonderful. I still can't see Troy, so let's go over to Ayob. Do you want to go next?
Thank you so much, Joe, Alicia, and Emma, um, for the opportunity just to present a discussion I had maybe with yourselves over a year ago. Let me just see if I can briefly share my slides. I spoke to all of you maybe a year ago, and the idea was that we had this AI tool that we were developing as researchers. We're still in this early stage, and I have an ask for you now because we've developed it a bit further. A brief background: my name is Ayoub. The Dutch spelling, the Germans like to confuse people, so it's Ayoub with a J. Did my academia in the Netherlands, Utrecht, research in neurostem cell research in Rutgers in New Jersey, immunology and stem cell research in Sweden, and then cancer stem cell research in the UK, where I did my PhD. Then I worked in biopharma in a number of pharma roles, global medical director, currently at Galderma as a global medical director within immunology and inflammatory diseases. And then I had a number of startups, of one of which is Helix, which is a AI startup that is launched, and I'm not involved with that anymore. And a innovation forum, which is a startup platform for postdocs and PhDs that want to, it's a non-for-profit that wants to support early stage researchers to develop startups. My colleague and I, Sergey and I, who did our PhD at the same institute at Cancer Research UK, he's a computer scientist, I'm a biomedic. We came together and said, one of the most boring things in clinical science is clinical meta-analyses. Can we use AI to actually automate that? The answer is yes, with a number of large language models. So most clinical research is being done. You have longitudinal studies that takes a lot of time. You have 38 million publications, and how do you go through that as a scientist or as a clinician? So what we've done is we developed this platform that now is able to do everything from beginning to the end. So it allows you to search, allows you to screen specific typical questions. So the typical clinical trial or guidelines questions. Then you go into extraction. It extracts from all the publications the entire publication, and it parses it, does analysis, does the statistical analyses as well, and then develops a report. So it has an agentic model that actually helps you to ask the right questions on what is a good clinical query within your field of expertise. Then it intelligently looks at what are the confidence intervals of all the data. So sometimes there's paucity in data. Then it collects that, and then it does the parsing as well. And then finally, once it's done that, it has some live review options. So living review. So if you want to say each few months, I want to know what the latest data is on this question that I have. So I have this meta-analysis done for longitudinal studies in non-small cell lung cancer, for example. And I want to have an update every few months to say, what is the newest data in this space? That then gets updated and says the confidence interval has improved because the 3 new clinical trials have been published with this statistical analysis. These are all the statistical models that have been that we're implying. And one of the main things with large language models is the hallucinations. And there's this provenance, which is this term that's being used for those who don't know. Provenance is basically a way to backtrack where the evidence came from. So the large language model tells you there's confidence in this, or this statement has been made, this clinical claim has been made. You often don't know where that comes from. So Provenance actually allows you to backtrack which publication was used to make that claim. And you can basically delineate every claim within your report. So that's an additional built-in that we have. Final thing is we've done a study just to see on the left side, you have an actual meta-analysis that was done. On the right side, we've done the same study in non-small cell lung cancer, and we found that there's almost 2 to 6% concordance. So we are almost on par with the clinician-led meta-analysis. We don't have access to all the papers because there's a payment wall, but that's the initial model. Mike asked to everybody who is here is we would love to do some co-publications with some of the clinicians and clinical researchers on this in this group. And please reach out to me, just either add me on LinkedIn or email me here. And then we would love to do some clinical studies with yourselves where we just look at clinical questions that you have and do some in silico studies alongside the ones that you have. That's it for myself. Thank you for your time. And thanks, Nikki and Emma and the rest for this opportunity.
Thank you so much. It's really interesting. I'm particularly interested myself at how we're using AI in our research processes. That's like one of the things I'm really interested in at the moment. So
wonderful.
Sounds super interesting. I hope people get in touch with you because it's an interesting project that you're doing.
Thank you. I'll put my email in the chat box just in case.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you so much.
I also particularly like the phrase "pico to publication." Well done with that little bit of marketing.
Thank you, Nico.
Yeah, I think I had one question for you, which is like I think you touched on it a bit. Like, what data is it actually drawing from? Because you said that there is a paywall barrier because you know all research isn't open. So is it just pulling open publications, preprints as well as it publishes?
So it pulls everything that's on PubMed and Google Scholar and all the other platforms. And then once, if for example, Nature or Lancet, the Lancet, if there's a paywall there and the group that has a academic access to it, then we can put that into the platform. And then it pulls it out. But we don't have access currently ourselves. But that's the issue with the non-open access. Correct.
Yeah, totally. Okay, that's super interesting. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Right, over to you, Nick.
Thank you so much, Emma. So we're now moving on to our thematic section, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Diana Bright, Public Health Evaluation Lead at Public Health Wales. And I think this might be a first for the Clinical AI interest group. I don't think we've had a kind of WHO author talking about their WHO report before. And of course, the report I'm referring to is Equity Across the Regulation, Implementation and Evaluation of Digital Health. And it's a WHO Regional Office for Europe report that Diana was one of the lead authors for. It's 120 pages of pure gold. But it's also brilliant that you're here to talk to us today to give us some highlights and some insights. So, Diana, thank you so much, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you see my screen?
Absolutely,
yes. Yes, we can.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So today, thanks for the invitation. And I work for Public Health Wales, and this work was done in collaboration with WHO Europe. So today I'm going to present findings from my scoping review. As you said, it's a very large report, 120 pages. So I'm going to try to summarize it today in 20 minutes. So today I'll focus on what the review tells us about where equity is currently addressed, where gaps persist, and what this means for systems increasingly shaped by data-driven and digital technologies. I think my computer has. Sorry. So why this matters? So this review was motivated by the growing role of digital technologies in health systems and the concerns around health equity. So as you know, digital health is increasingly positioned as a way to improve access, efficiency, and quality of care. It is applied a wide range of settings, populations, and stages of the health system. However, evidence consistently shows that health inequalities persist and that these inequalities are also translated within digital health contexts. So, for example, through unequal access, differences in digital skills, variation in engagement. But also it is, they are showing new forms of exclusion in relation to whose data is visible and whose needs are designed for. So although equity is increasingly recognized in digital health strategies and policies, it is often addressed at a high or aspirational level. So as digital health becomes core to health systems, equity needs to shift from an aspiration to a system level requirement. Sorry about that. So what do we aim to do? So to date, it is not clear how equity commitments are translated into the regulation, implementation, and evaluation of digital health systems. This gap is what the review set out to explore. So our aim was to identify gaps and opportunities to strengthen equitable digital health systems. And we applied a socio-technical approach to examine equity across digital health systems. So we mapped equity across 3 technical components that you see here in blue, which is digital infrastructure and systems, data, digital health tool performance, and we included 3 social components. These are access to digital technology, digital skills for health, and use and engagement. And the social components were considered across public, patients, carers, and professionals. So for this scoping review, we covered literature published between January 2015 and June 2024. It was quite a comprehensive review because we included 154 sources. So we draw on both academic literature, but we also include 50% of it was great literature, such as policy documents, guidance, and evaluation frameworks. So the primary focus was the WHO European region, but global evidence was included where relevant. For the analysis, we use descriptive and narrative synthesis to analyze the data, combining quantitative mapping of equity domains that I just showed you with qualitative insights into current equity considerations across digital health components. The goal was to better understand patterns, gaps, and recurrent challenges across the literature. So when we talk about equity domains, we conceptualize equity across 5 broad domains, and this is the WHO equity classification. These 5 domains are demographic, geographic, economic, social, and cultural. These domains were informed by established frameworks, including Progress Plus. I don't know if you are familiar with it. Also SAGR guidelines and the UK Equality Act. By using these frameworks, it allows us to look at how different population characteristics are addressed, defined, and reported across the digital health literature, and where there is consistency or variation. So in this figure, when looking across the literature, some equity domains appear far more frequently than others. So for example, ethnicity and age are the most commonly referenced, followed by disability and urban-rural residents. So you may wonder why sex and gender, particularly for AI and data-driven technologies, didn't appear alongside ethnicity and age, but it's because in this review, we analyze sex and gender as separate domains, following the SAGR guidelines, and this was one of the requirements of the WHO, that they should be treated differently. However, they are commonly combined and reported together in the literature, and this highlights a broader challenge around inconsistent definitions and limited disaggregating reporting, which has implications for how equity impacts can be addressed and compared. In terms of regulation, our review highlights that equity is often acknowledged in principle, yet rarely operationalized in a consistent or systematic way. Regulatory frameworks tend to prioritize safety, privacy, data protection, and clinical performance, but equity considerations are less consistently addressed. In particular, there are limited regulatory expectations around data representativeness, bias, or the monitoring of differences between population groups after or post-deployment. Although emerging frameworks, including the EU Artificial Intelligence Act, emphasize fairness, transparency, and accountability, health is not clearly recognized as a distinct domain within these regulations. So this means that equity risks in AI-driven health tools may not undergo the level of scrutiny needed to ensure equitable performance across all population groups. So at the implementation stage, the literature points to significant equity gaps. So for example, while user-centered design is widely promoted, its application in practice is inconsistent. Co-design and participatory approaches are frequently recommended, but apply unevenly, despite evidence that they can support more inclusive and context-appropriate digital health tools. This is particular for vulnerable and marginalized populations. The review also notes that existing assessment processes rarely establish minimum equity requirements for infrastructure or implementation at scale. Issues such as digital literacy, cultural relevance, and wider structural barriers are often insufficiently addressed in implementation guidance. And in terms of evaluation, this is probably as well one of the weak links. So although equity is also recognized in newly published evaluation frameworks, the guidance of how these should be operationalized in practice remains limited. Like there's limited good examples for people to kind of see and be guided by them. So evaluation frameworks rarely include standardized equity metrics. For example, the post-deployment monitoring of equity impact is rare. Disaggregated data collection is recommended, but these practices are not always embedded into evaluation frameworks. And when looking at the literature, we rarely find any studies that actually looked at intersectionality analysis. So there is limited evidence of consistent approaches to assessing fairness, bias, or inequitable impact in real-world use. And this limits visibility of who benefits and who may be excluded. And this is particularly important for AI and data-driven technology. So in terms of equity by design, we found this as a cross-cutting theme. Equity by design, this term started to appear in the literature as a way of addressing the challenges I just mentioned. It is used to emphasize the importance of considering equity early and across the digital health life cycle. So it has to be from the very beginning, not an afterthought. However, our review finds limited guidance on how equity design, as the same should be operationalized in practice. And there's little evidence of supporting standards, metrics, or accountability mechanisms. The literature also points to the need for coordinated national and regional action with systems that are monitored and adapted over time to ensure equitable access and benefit for everyone. So I'm going to summarize the key recommendations from the report. First, the review emphasizes the need to promote the inclusion of equity considerations across the digital health life cycle. So while equity is often acknowledged, as I mentioned, at a high level, it is not consistently embedded across all stages, and this lack of alignment contributes to uneven outcomes. Second, the evidence highlights the importance of improving data quality and representativeness alongside stronger monitoring of equity impacts. Data plays a central role in shaping digital health systems, and gaps in data can directly affect who benefits and who is left behind. So closely linked to this one is the need to support wider adoption of equity-driven evaluation, including ongoing monitoring and disaggregated reporting. As I mentioned, the review found that evaluation is one of the weakest points for understanding equity impacts in practice. Our review also points to the importance of supporting interdisciplinary collaboration across sectors. because equity gaps are socio-technical. It's not only about the technology, but it's also all the social aspects of it. Addressing them requires bringing together multiple partners and perspectives rather than working in silos. In addition, the evidence supports encouraging inclusive and participatory approaches in digital health design and implementation to better reflect the needs and context of different populations. So finally, the review recommends developing harmonized equity-focused regional frameworks alongside coordinated national regional action to support more consistent and systematic approaches to equity across digital health systems. And this one is one that we are going to take forward with our partners at the WHO Europe. So the next step is for us to develop a self-assessment tool for members of states to be able to assess how they are, treating equity. So what does this mean? And so overall, our review shows that equity gaps in digital health are not isolated or incidental. They are systemic and cumulative, and they arise across both technical and social components of digital health systems. So any small disadvantage at different stages of a digital health system add up over time, creating much larger inequities in who benefits from digital health. The review also shows weak alignment across regulation, implementation, and evaluation. So when these stages are not connected, equity considerations can be lost as systems move from strategy into practice. So addressing equity, therefore, requires a whole system approach that considers how social and technical components interact and reinforce one another, rather than focusing on isolated interventions. So our findings suggest that current equity gaps are not due to a lack of awareness. Like there's a lot of considerations about equity in terms of the importance of it. But the problem is kind of the limitations in governance, evaluation, and accountability. So addressing these gaps requires methodological work on how equity can be measured, assessed, and monitored alongside technical innovation. So this creates clear opportunities for research and collaboration across disciplines. Addressing equity in digital health requires coordination across sectors, institutions, and levels of governance, including collaboration between researchers, policymakers, practitioners, and regional partners. Because without this, equity is unlikely to translate into equitable outcomes. But as a more positive kind of key messages, as I say, there is a growing recognition of equity. So the challenge now is less about starting from scratch, but a kind of more about building on this momentum to ensure equity is embedded and sustained in practice. So this was a very brief summary of the report, which is available online. And I will finish by acknowledging the project team and the WHO Regional Office for Europe and our research team in Public Health Wales who contributed to this work. So thanks for listening. And yeah, I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Diana. You won't be able to hear it, but there is a round of applause echoing across the globe at the moment. Just a quick question from me to open. So you talked about equity by design, and that may be a term that some people aren't particularly familiar with. Would you mind just expanding on that a little, and then maybe giving some examples of the tools you talked about for assessing equity?
Yeah. So equity by design is an approach. Is an approach that is that says that equity has to be, implemented from the very beginning. So it's not like an afterthought, but in every stage of the digital health life cycle, it has to be implemented. From the design of these tools to the implementation and how these are evaluated, everything. Equity has to be implemented in all of the stages. So it's kind of, and one of the key messages about the equity by design is that it has to be intentional. So because it's not an easy thing to do, so it does require an intentional effort from, across partners and organizations to kind of put everything together and work towards achieving equity. There's a new framework, I believe is from the USA. Let me give you the name. It's a new framework published maybe a year ago. It's an evidence and consensus-based digital healthcare equity framework. So this framework, for example, is one that really talks about equity by design and how everything has to be, included in this digital health life system. So that is a good example. However, it would help maybe later on to have examples of how this was implemented in practice. I guess that's where the gap is, because there's guidance, but there is little sharing of, what happens in practice, what went well, what didn't go well, and all that kind of shared learning, I think, is missing as well.
Yeah. I'm just looking at just trying to kind of manage the chat at the same time. So, Mohammed, are you able to unmute and ask your question? And indeed, if anyone wants to put their hand up, then that would be brilliant as well.
Hi, everyone.
Yes.
This is Mohammed from the KSA, and thank you very much for a wonderful presentation about the digitalization and diversity and the groups as well. A lot of a biggest spectrum whole medicine is gonna be changed, and people are adopting to this as a both model. My question is about with this digitalization, the data gathered is less private. I understand it, and the privacy rules are not as applicable as in the form of physical or the hospital based data now. So how to handle this situation? I mean, the people, the privacy and the confidentiality and the permission to use data, how it can be managed?
Yes, we have one of the, because we have 6 digital components, but those 6 components have subcomponents. So one of them was the privacy, and there's issues about this in, for example, vulnerable and marginalized populations. So there's also needs to be different ways of how people manage consent, how they talk about privacy to patients. Is that what you?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Because once our information is on a database or on a server, then probably the concept of privacy and consent become weak.
Yeah.
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 That's my concern with the digitalization. Or we can say the people need to understand, if we are having a digitalized service, there is no privacy for our data.
Yeah. So yeah, privacy is a big issue. People need to understand how their data is going to be used, and that's also the report also talks about professionals that are able to explain that to the people they work with. There needs to be also professionals talking about all the ethics considerations and all the practices and the privacy, issues around data. That I think there's still a little bit of work to do in that space. So one of the recommendations as well is like the diversity of the teams working in digital health, especially when we talk about AI and data-driven technologies, is that there needs to be diversity in terms of not the person, also the personal characteristics, but also the professionals, and ethics is one of those kind of key areas that maybe we need to work towards too, so that all of these considerations about privacy can be taken into consideration, when dealing with these technologies.
Okay. Because here, like in KSA, I'm working here. the confidentiality, people don't care about a lot about it. So as compared to the West part of the world. Here, the people can discuss their thing with supervisor, managers, and the friends, and everyone knows about everything. But from the Western spectrum point of view and the governance and point of view officially, I think that's like an area that need to be focused and work more diligently about. That's my concern or question, right? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. Nazia, you've got your hand up. Be great to hear from you.
Hi, everyone. I don't know if I'm visible. Oops.
Yes, you are.
Okay, cool. So just a bit about myself. So I'm a PhD student based in Sheffield, but it's very interdisciplinary kind of PhD. So I'm primarily in computer science, but also in healthcare and social science. So this report, I really, really loved it. And the presentation, I think this was amazing because this is literally what I'm working in. So what I'm working in is mitigating biases in health data. That's the problem statement, one could say. And the entire premise of my PhD is about the inequities as it was discussed here. And one of the solutions that we can have towards that. So as Dr. Diana mentioned, the source of that inequity could be in multiple domains. So the data itself could be biased, the algorithms could be biased, or how the entire pipeline is being used in the public domain, that could be biased. So I'm looking at one particular thing, the data aspect of it. And my solution currently is a computer science-based solution to this problem. So I'm working on synthetic health data. And synthetic health data is something that's not as well known, or it does not have as many policies or governance or regulatory frameworks about it. But I think we can see some really good results, not just for bias mitigation, which is what I'm working on, but also, as Mohammed Asif was mentioning, the privacy aspect. Because with synthetic health data, it's not directly linked to a patient. It's computer generated. It's generative AI, product of generative AI. So that could be a really good use case, and I'm really excited. Sorry, I've been speaking for a long time. I had just a quick question. So Dr. Diana mentioned interdisciplinary collaboration. I was wondering what that would look like, because in my work also, this thing came up a lot. So I'm right now in my final year of PhD, and this interdisciplinary collaboration came up time and time again. One of the things that I have tried to implement, at least do some sort of research or experiments, is interdisciplinary collaboration in terms of evaluation frameworks. So, and this is me coming from computer science point of view. When we have any kind of data, we have different metrics, statistical metrics to measure how good the data is, if it's usable. Then we can have a use case of it and see if it's actually working in the real world scenario instead of just measuring the statistics. The thing that I have been working on a bit is inviting the domain experts and asking them to review the synthetic data, just coming from synthetic data point of view. And because our idea is that computer scientists can have some very pure mathematical evaluation metrics, accuracy is 90%, and this is this XYZ. But the domain experts, when we bring them in and show them the data, is this actually something that is realistic? Is this biologically correct? Have you seen this kind of data in patients in your experience? So that was one of the things. I was wondering if you have any more ideas on what would this interdisciplinary collaboration look like?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it has to be, as I said, like there's need to be a diversity in terms of professionals working on this, because like people working with data, they know the ins and outs of it. But then someone might come with a different perspective, and we looked at other things in terms of equity that maybe, the other person wouldn't look at it. And we talk about interdisciplinary collaboration, from the, innovators, the ones who are developing all these kind of technologies. If, people with an ethics background, people with, statistics and all of, that kind of knowledge. We also, in terms of when we talk about collaboration as well, because it's not only the technology that matters, it's a social technical kind of system. So you also need, for example, the community sector as well, kind of advocating for patients, kind of advocating for the society, for vulnerable populations and all of that. So I guess that's why we, even the private sector needs to be involved in this, it's everyone, regulators, that, if they consider equity, they, it can be established what is like kind of the minimum to go forward. I think, I guess, yeah. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it does. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Joanna.
Hi everyone. Thanks very much for the presentation, Diana. I'm Joanna McLaughlin. I'm a public health consultant. I noted that you found, I think, over 50 frameworks in your scoping review, existing frameworks, that is. But the recommendation seems to center on developing a harmonized framework, I think is the terminology you've used, isn't it? I just wondered if you could say a bit more about, are there some clear winners already, some really good frameworks in existence, or actually are we in the position that they're all too aspirational and really the recommendation is that something much more structured and black and white in terms of what these frameworks could offer to the different settings where they're used as needed still?
Yeah, thank you. So we don't have a lot of frameworks per se, because we have like a mix of reports, guidelines, academic papers. So it's kind of a mix. We found a few frameworks, like the one I mentioned when we started the question, and the questions that talk about evaluation. So the thing is as well that we looked at digital health as a whole. So there are very good frameworks when, looking at video consultations, for example, or telehealth. And then there are frameworks that look at more kind of all types of digital health as well. Like it could be from health, telehealth, or they also mention AI. So the one I mentioned before, which was published, I think it was published in 2024. So the Digital Healthcare Equity Framework, I believe that kind of talks about more in general, not in a very specific one. So that is a very good one, but because it's new as well, there's not kind of, as I said, like there's no kind of this example of we apply this and this is how it works. So I feel like Canada, for example, they are very good at looking at equity because they really recognize the differences in the population. They really recognize the native populations, for example, in Canada, and all the indigenous people. They are very well considering kind of the equity they do. But we are still waiting for more learning about how to apply those frameworks that are, that were published, after COVID, because as well, like, because COVID kind of accelerated everything in terms of digital health. Some of the things were implemented without like the proper kind of period of evaluation and considerations that normally things have. So we're still waiting for that kind of learning from these new frameworks and how these have been applied in practice. So as I said, it's not like we need to start from scratch, but we just need to kind of see how it goes and how people are doing it so that we can learn that lesson that I believe we still haven't learned that well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And thank you, Jo. HP.
Hello. I didn't know that I named myself HP in here. I'm just realizing.
Oh, right.
Anyway, thank you so
Please
much,
do introduce
Anna.
yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Manel Bouchikwa, and I work as a data analyst in the Croydon GP Collaborative. But well, I'm more in the tech field, and I've heard two interesting things. That's why I've raised my hand in here. It's such a great meeting. I'm hearing really interesting thoughts, and thank you so much, Diana, for your amazing presentation. But I'm here. I've already responded to Mohammed Asif regarding like his a question about governing data, etc., because I've been trying to build a platform to help researchers in the clinical AI. And I've noticed, well, every time I discover something new, more interesting that I can implement and all, but using human in the loop approach has been a very good approach for me. I think a human that's always updating the governance, checking it over and everything, that's something we still can use so that we're sure that the governance is good, especially when it's the health field. But also, I've heard something interesting also from Nazia. So for me, it's not really a question. I just I'm taking this as an opportunity to share something. So Nazia talked about synthetic data, which is a really interesting approach to take when you're building platforms or you're training your AI or regarding health data. It's always like it's not always the best approach to use actual live data that exists. So synthetic data is good. It's also good for equity, etc. So I am in the process of building a GPT that generates synthetic data for researchers in the machine learning field or in any in any AI field. And I can share that with Nazia if she wants to take this as an opportunity to say that I can share it. It's also it includes I want it to be to have equity and everything. But yeah, I'll share my journal here. That's all I wanted to say, really. Yeah, but thank you so much for this great presentation.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Just before we come to Raj, Kevin, I don't know if you want to make your point voice to voice, as it were. If not, I'm happy to. Oh, yes.
Yeah. No. I suppose what I'm saying is that there's an aspect that doesn't get talked about, which is the commercial drivers here, because the US, theoretically, we've got safe harbor rules and data is protected, as in GDPR. And in fact, you could characterize the US and GDPR as opposite ends of the spectrum, where the US, you have no privacy. The data is the price you pay for using the product. And safe harbor rules basically allow American companies typically to get you to sign away those rights if you want to use the product, right? So a founding factor, but that's an assumption. You don't have to build technology like that. So, I mean, are you seeing evidence that people are pushing back against that model? Because that's driven purely by venture capital and the desire to get the fastest return on capital that they can, rather than in necessarily, quote, investing, you see what I mean? Have you seen anything like that? That was the point I was really making.
Yeah, that's a very important point. We didn't look that much into the kind of commercial private field because, yeah, that's a kind of a different thing.
Yeah, I suppose the example I give you is mental health, right? Mental health has had very little technology. ChatGPT or LLMs have come along and appear to give at least a triage benefit, but there's no evidence that benefit is A, sustained, B, meaningful over time, right? But they're proliferating like mushrooms in a BS factory. And that's being driven by commercial pressures. So it kind of changes the ground under your feet, even when you're discussing privacy, right? Because the reality becomes something else, and everybody goes, "Well, that's what we've got." And these would be nice if we had that at the start, but we are where we are. That'll be the argument you get back from politicians and lawmakers.
Yeah, but I guess the regulatory bodies are the ones who should be able to tackle that a bit better, I believe. because at the
They'll be
moment,
playing catch up though.
it's at the moment there's a lot of catch up to do for regulatory bodies, because this changes and evolves so quickly as well that it's very but it should be better regulated.
That evolution is being driven by commercial pressures, not by research, right? And it's a part of the conversation I don't see mentioned often enough, because you have to add that in, I think, to really understand the dynamics of these situations.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. You are in.
Raj, over to you. Thank you so much.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. My name is Raj Mahindra. I'm basically a retired cardiologist. I'm currently a medical examiner, and I've got a background in clinical ethics. So I'm chair of an ethics committee, chair of a body called the UK Clinical Ethics Network. We deal a lot with practical ethics problems. And I think there is a fundamental problem going on with all of this. The first question to ask is whose interests are being served by these processes? And I think that goes to what the previous speaker was saying, which is the interests that are being served here are the interests of large multinational companies, not the individuals who are having their data collected. And I think who has to address that explicitly. If you're collecting data from someone and they do not benefit, then what have you done? And I guess this is the ethical question. It's a crucial question when you're designing a system or any model. And I think the disquiet that people have been raising is built around this idea. The other thing is that if you look at this idea of privacy, there are people or large groups who included, I would say, you're no different from a large multinational as far as I'm concerned, in that you are collecting data to benefit who? To allow you to make decisions or judgments or offer guidance. But who does it benefit? And I think the person whose data is collected should be the one who benefits. Build your system in that way. But that means you have to respect the individual. And that means you have to respect their choice to say no to giving you their data, or at least allow them to say, I will give you my data, but what do I get out of this? And I think there's been a lot of this data aggregation using defense of anonymization. So we can aggregate data because we can't identify the individuals, but again, who benefits? So I think there are deep ethical issues, deep ethical concerns on all of this. And I would encourage a more sort of fruitful discussion with people who have that perspective.
Thank you so much for that, Raj. Sorry, Diana. Yeah, over to you.
No, I agree, and that's I think in the report we do mention that ethical professionals need to be included in those conversations, because as they are the ones who probably have all these questions to ask, and then that's where equity can be targeted a bit better.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. We're coming into land now. So thank you so much, everyone, for your questions. Thank you again to Diana for such a brilliant talk, and a huge round of applause from around the virtual room. We are meeting again next month when we're going to be joined by, on the 12th of May, when we're going to be joined by Dr. Charlotte Blees, who's going to talk to us, giving a talk entitled Challenging Conventional Wisdom in Healthcare and AI. So look to be challenged when you come along in May. Until then, enjoy the spring or whichever season you are currently in, and look forward to seeing you very soon. Bye-bye all.